Welcome to another episode of the Engineering Success Podcast. Today, we are excited to be joined by Sundi Mint. She is a software engineering manager at Cars Commerce. Not only does Sundi lead a dynamic team of developers, but she's also the creator of a popular Elixir community and hosts her very own podcast dedicated to this.
Why don't we start with you? Tell us a little about yourself, where you work, and what your title is.
Yeah, sure. My name is Sundi, and I am an engineering manager at Cars Commerce. I'm based out of Baltimore, Maryland, but I do mostly consider myself like a DC person. I spent most of my career in DC as a software engineer, mostly worked at startups, and then I did eventually work at a company that used Elixir, the language, which I just became very near and dear to my heart. So even though I am no longer an engineer, I very strongly wanted to be in the Elixir community still. And Cars is a company that uses Elixir, the language. And so I'm managing engineers that are working with my favorite language, even though I no longer am writing code. So engineering manager by day, I guess hobbies, do some management type things in my free time. Like I do a lot of speaking at different conferences and such. I run a meetup, DC Elixir. I've been gardening recently, so that's fun.
Where can they find it? Where can they join?
Yeah, DC Elixir is primarily on Meetup right now. If you search for DC Elixir, you can find us there.
Yeah. And you also have Flutter experience, if I recall from your LinkedIn.
Yeah, when I was working at a consultancy, SmartLogic, we did some projects in Flutter. That was my first time doing any kind of mobile app development, and I really did enjoy Flutter. It challenged my brain in a different way, more object-oriented, just different experience fully than like Elixir, which was very functional.
Yeah. So were you working with it when it was still the beta launch of it? It wasn't in the full release. They hadn't quite patched everything in it.
I think we started working with it after it was a year old, so wherever that was.
Yeah, because I think it was only about two to 3 years ago that they finally launched 2.0, which basically became the official release, because I remember version 1 had a specific bug on Samsung Galaxies.
Oh, interesting.
So what do you think it takes for an engineer to get a seat at the table for leading? Not necessarily being a leader, being part of the conversation to help make decisions and influence decisions.
Yeah. I think that kind of starts with a partnership with the manager. Every engineer should have one-on-ones, whether it's weekly or every other week or every month, and they should really be expressing at those times. I would like to be able to express my thoughts, ideas, opinions at whatever leadership meetings there are. And I guess every organization has a different level of that. Some will have like leadership roundtable type things for software engineering. So like maybe all the leads, if you have multiple squads, maybe each team lead goes to a particular meeting every week or every other week, talking about standards, testing, kind of things that affect the entire org. And that's a really good place for engineers to really be heard and talk about their ideas. And usually when an engineer is shifting from just that IC role where they're just individually contributing, letting their manager know, yeah, I think I'm ready to step up and have these conversations with more of the team. The manager should be helping them figure out where is the appropriate place for them to be having those conversations.
And how do you make sure that these type of engineers are actually spending their time on the right things?
Yeah, that can be a really interesting one because there are many different personalities of engineers. A lot of them really like to just bury themselves in the details and the nitty-gritty. I really like to give people outcomes that they should be going for, even if they're doing a discovery ticket where they're supposed to look into something that went wrong last week. What is the outcome of that? It's a time box, it's 2 to 4 hours, and at the end of it, you should have tickets written to figure out what to address. Some of the best advice I got just in my career generally was make sure you're aligned with what your manager and what your company is expecting of you. So if you had expectations for something to be like, this is the most important thing this week, and your manager and everyone else up from that was expecting something totally different, like no matter how proud you are of that work, knowing that you worked on the wrong thing can feel really crappy. So just making sure you're aligned, I think, was some of the best advice I got.
It's also not just working on the wrong thing, right? If the manager comes to you and says, I want you to do X this way, don't make a suggestion of going a different route, because sometimes that can come off the wrong way, right?
I think it depends on what it is. I've had situations before where, like, we literally didn't have the budget for someone to spend an entire 2 months to work on a feature. And that can be a pretty difficult thing for a manager to say, I know this is really important to you, but please don't work on this. This is not the focus, and this is not what a client or a stakeholder is looking for. But if you are pitching work to an entire team for a product team who's saying, this needs to come first, I really do lean on my lead engineers to give me feedback. I think we need to be working on something else before we work on this. So it is a two-way street. Like, you do have to have mutual respect that both parties want to get the job done in the best way possible. I gave it Elixir Conf last year, where I talked about how there's a mutual trust that you have to really operate a team. So I trust that my engineers are trying to do the best thing for our product, and my engineers trust that I am also looking out for them and their well-being and their interests, like their career interests. So I'm not just sending them down a rabbit hole to just do bug after bug, right? I'm trying to give them work that's interesting to them as well. So I think it's a two-way street.
How do you think about driving engineers to make sure that they're going towards what the business outcomes that you want within the business?
Care too much in that, like, they just want to do work and they just want to work on interesting engineering problems and find cool solutions. Some of them do care about the business. I don't like to force people into anything particularly. I don't want to force them in anything they don't want to do when it comes to like business stuff or what do they want to get involved with. So I think that on the one hand, you should be able to, you as an engineering manager should be able to work with your stakeholders and figure out what the most important prioritized work is, and then be able to set up sprints and be very transparent about, this is the next 3 sprints, this is what our focus on, this goes to this OKR or this particular goal that the company has for the year, and be able to talk to your engineers about that. And just the engineers know, okay, these 3 things are coming up for me next sprint. Cool, got it. But I also like to give the engineers an opportunity to come to me with like technical one-pagers on what they think is important. And then I will try to give that feedback to whoever else is running various features, working with other teams, and say, hey, my team brought this up. We think this is important to work on. We can handle it, but we might need to work with various other teams just to get a gut check to make sure it's going to work with everyone else's work. So that kind of stuff does come up as well.
Okay. So let's move on to some like kind of team building management questions. So what signals do you use to make sure you're managing your team effectively?
Yeah, I think that does really come back down to trust. One thing that I really can't stand is making people feel trapped, particularly in meetings. Engineers notoriously hate being in a lot of meetings, right? But I think the worst thing for anyone, not just engineers, is to say that a meeting is going to be from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. and take them all the way into 4 p.m. Like, that's rude. When I see we get to, in that scenario, it's like 3:05, I'm like, no, we're done. We're done. We're 5 minutes over. We just got to cut it off. I think establishing time limits and time boxing for anything is really helpful for teams when, especially in this like remote environment, so that they know that their time is being spent well. And so then when they can trust that you're not just like holding them hostage in meetings just to hold them hostage, you can actually have more fun meetings sometimes. And just, this particular meeting is a stand-up meeting, but the one that happens on Friday is a little bit looser and just like casual. And yeah, this is what I'm working on today.
Yeah, so that would lead on to one of my next questions. So how do you effectively make sure you're managing your team, especially in a remote or hybrid environment?
Yeah, just making sure that there's always some kind of touch point. We do synchronous stand-ups every other day. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then like stand-up threads every day. So that makes it like a nice hybrid of, oh, come on. So having touch points, so you just don't go an entire week and then find out that somebody was working on the wrong thing or that they were stuck. I think that's particularly difficult when someone's, yeah, I just didn't want to bother anyone, but I've been stuck on this for a week. You're like a helpful group of people. We would love to help unstick you. So let's see what we can do to help you out.
I've learned that in my career that people don't want to ask for help sometimes. And I've been in situations where I've walked in and they're troubleshooting something, and instead of telling me what's going on, I discover what's going on and fix it and come back and say, hey, your problem's fixed, and this is what the issue was. realizing that's what they were working on and they just didn't want to rope you into it. And it's sometimes it's like, hey, did anyone make this change or did anyone do this? Those type of communications are important. Or does anyone know about this? Because I think it can actually put your productivity up, because if somebody can help you get it done in 2 seconds versus spending an hour or 2 hours, it's utilizing the team, right?
Yeah, a lot of the times when they tell me about not wanting to bother people and they spend a week on something, the example I like to give them is, imagine you are billing at an hourly rate and you don't want to bother someone else. Two engineers is double the cost for 1 hour. But one engineer multiplied by 40 hours, because you spent 40 hours in a week doing it, is more than the 2 hours that it would have cost for you guys to fix it together, right? So that's usually the example I pull up. Our time is money in the end of the day. So whenever somebody says that they don't want to bother anyone, they don't want to waste anyone's time, I always try to bring it back to, it's not a waste of time to get you unstuck. Just knowing your threshold, like not to ask for help immediately, but knowing, okay, if I don't figure this out by the end of the day, tomorrow morning I should mention at stand up that I'm stuck and I should reach out for help.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty important. And that's something usually a junior is learning, as what is that threshold I ask for help. That's really important. And then the other side of this is like the mentorship coaching aspect. Sometimes you do run into engineers who are just like, yeah, I just wanted to, this is your issue. Absolutely. Sometimes when you run into, you don't have a pressing deadline, you can pair with that engineer and be like, okay, so this is where you got stuck. Tell me what you did. Where did you go from here? What line are we looking at right now? Walking them through it and then trying to lead them to that. If you don't just give them the answer, then maybe they will find it for themselves next time. Teach them and fish and all of that.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's important to cross train and knowledge share. That's the thing that doesn't seem to happen a lot in engineering. People sometimes have the mentality that if I share this information, I'm less valuable.
Yeah.
If I keep it to myself, I'm more valuable. And it's just like that. So what values would you look for a team member if you were building a team?
Yeah, this has come up recently as I've been hiring and filling out my team. Outside of regular things like competency, ability to do the job, has the skill set, the two things I really rely on are team interviews. I really prioritize my team interviewing the people who are coming in, because ultimately they're going to be the ones working with these people. So I will usually have them do to the technical interviews and see what their vibes are. And then also, I really prioritize the people who want to be there. You can have much better experience working with someone when they really do want to be there. They're excited about the work or the language or the team, and it's just super helpful for them. I think I have worked with very talented engineers who were just sort of neutral about everything that they were doing. And while it was fine working with them, like there was no problems exactly, it was not very exciting to work with them. That wasn't like the energy that like the team didn't get a particular energy working with them. It's just maybe not the most enjoyable thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, one of the values I always look for is somebody that's willing to learn and always wants to learn.
Hmm.
Because that if you have a new technology, then you've got somebody that's willing to sit down and learn it and effectively help the team better, right? Exactly. Some
Yeah.
people just know this is my job, this is what I want to do. I don't want to do anything extra. And then you've got those people that are actually going out there learning new technology even on their own time, and then saying, hey, we should look at implementing this because it gives us X, Y, and Z. And at the end of the day, it's one of those decisions, right? Where what they've learned might actually be valuable to the business, because if it gives the engineers capacity, because they're taking a task that takes them like 4 hours and doing it in 10 minutes now, and you just gain those 4 hours, that's about value.
Particularly in Elixir, I find this less of an obstacle. Everyone is really interested in learning in the Elixir community. I don't know if it's something in the water or what, but for folks who are learning, who write Elixir, they're just like so passionate about it. And there's so much content, 5 different podcasts, including the one that I co-host, Elixir Wizards. So there's a lot of podcast content for people who like to consume new information that way. A lot of newsletters. We have a whole Slack. Like it's so easy, and like the information is at your fingertips at all times, that I find that actually really nice for people who are in this community and like want to learn and enjoy learning. It's pretty accessible for everyone.
Um, How do you think about driving performance versus maintaining a healthy culture?
Yeah, so there are a few things. Team-wide performance can be harder to measure, but I usually try to look at, I don't want to say sprint velocity, but I take a look at what we accomplish over the course of multiple weeks. So usually a 6-week average, just to see how we're doing against ourselves. I never will compare to another team or anything. And then individual performance, usually I'll take a look at similarly, don't compare yourself to anyone else, but how are you doing this month? How were you doing last month? There's like a numbers aspect, like a literal number of PRs opened, which doesn't really tell a good story, or number of story points, which doesn't always tell a good story. But over a number of years or a number of months, you can have averages that help tell you maybe a person's doing more or less in this month. I've always worked at places that had pretty extensive, helpful career trajectories that talk a lot about what is something that is an expectation of your role right now, and what is something that is an expectation of the role up, like the next role up on the promotion scale. And where are you on that? Are you currently doing your job every day really well, or are you more in the I've been leaning into the next role? And the more and more you see them leaning into the next role, that's when we start talking about, okay, I think you're probably ready for me recommending you for a promotion kind of thing. And a lot of people are trying to get promotions. So usually I'm working with them on, okay, so if that's where your goal is for the next year or so, team performance wise, let's make sure that you're operating in this next category or close to this next category. So then the next review cycle, we can talk about that being a reality.
Yeah. And so then how do you balance the developer productivity, the velocity, the quality of what you're building, and the team's health? So combating burnout.
That's probably something I've been very lucky that I haven't had to work too much around recently, because the team I work with is very capable of letting me know, no, that's probably not going to be a good thing for us to pull in right now. It's really just like an open line of communication. Before a production issue or a bug might come up, I'll mention at one of those synchronous meetings, hey, this thing came up. I think it's probably more important than X, Y, and Z. Do you guys agree? And yes, no, maybe. And then we'll pull something else out, usually balancing it that way. Everything is a conversation.
So let's talk about your role transition. What surprised you most about your transition into a manager role?
I think the surprising thing was more that I actually used to be a hybrid engineering manager and individual contributor. So I spent 50% of my time on writing code and 50% of my time managing other people on the team. I really had to take myself out of people management and into code writing. And it was a really big shift from one section to the other. I couldn't swap back and forth. It was really difficult. And switching to be a full-time engineering manager, no code writing whatsoever, really opened my brain up to do everything I really wanted to do with my day. I feel like I'm a much more productive human, worker, all of that now that I'm focused on one role, which kind of sounds obvious. It just, yeah, it was a very surprising thing for me to be like, oh, wow, now that I am not doing both, I am really able to do one very well.
So then let me ask you a little personal question, engineering related, because you're obviously doing management, you're doing podcasts outside, you're doing speaking of engagements. How do you manage all your time?
Hmm. So I used to be a pretty avid bullet journaler, and that would help me separate my time. I used to do personal tasks in a bullet journal, everything work related in a Google Calendar. Almost everything I do has a Google Doc attached to it. Most people would tell you I'm doing too much. And usually, if I take on another thing, someone will tell me to swap out something else.
I got the comment from one of my coworkers personally, right? That they knew about all the certifications I've gotten over in the last 6 months, and they know I'm a father.
Mhm.
And then it was like, how do you find the time and how can you focus? I schedule everything. I make a task list. This is what I'm going to do for the day. This is when I'm going to do it, get it done. And then that way I am on focus. I know sometimes if you want to study for something, you're studying on your free time usually. And I know it's so much easier to say, you know what, let me go watch Netflix.
Mhm. I was organized, but like sitting down and studying was difficult. I'm better at organizing thoughts, and it's probably the trait that makes me a decent manager. The more I manage people, the more I understand about different brain types. People like to quote Myers-Briggs. At my current role, we use the DISC profiles. Are you more direct? Are you more supportive? All of that kind of stuff. But in terms of how you organize your day, that is like highly personal to everyone. Like something that works for me will not work for you, will not work for my friend or my brother or anyone, right? So you have to find your system that works and then stick to it. It's just finding it that's difficult. Bullet journaling doesn't always work for me. And I had to work my way around that. Like finding out my system didn't work for me anymore because I had changed the way I organized my day was an interesting thing. But yeah, we've got it handled now.
So in the age of AI that we are
Mhm.
in now, how are you handling the changes that come about with, especially with not only development, but other aspects of people wanting to implement AI in various ways? How are you handling that?
In terms of people wanting to implement it, I handle it the same way I've handled any of the new technology hotness. AI is just the newest hotness today. For a long time, it was when React first came on scene, everyone in my company wanted us to switch from Angular to React. No one knew what it was at the time, but they all wanted to do it. Other people wanted to use Vue. In the Elixir world, as soon as Phoenix Live View was something that was available to people, which was a framework everybody wanted, it's the rival to React in the Elixir world. Everyone wanted to jump on it immediately, but there was no documentation yet. We didn't know what it could and couldn't handle. My advice is always just like, hey, just chill out, see where it's going to be, where it's going to end up. Maybe take it and experiment with it on some small thing, but to change your entire business plan and your whole structure and everything just to match this new technology. Like, I think AI is here to stay, but some things might not be here tomorrow. And for you to spend 6 months out of your fiscal year or whatever your year is to implement that new feature would really suck if it just went away new and untested. So I do usually err on the side of caution, but I like people experimenting with it. I just don't believe in betting your entire business on it.
You've got people that use it and then they're dumping sensitive data right into it. You shouldn't be doing that.
I personally believe that you shouldn't be dumping sensitive information in. I think GPT 4.0 has internet access now. It knows more things. How I personally use it is if you can do a task, but it'll take you like 2 days to do it, using the chat GPTs of the world to just generate whatever that thing is. Let's say a talk proposal. Let's say I'm trying to go for a talk and I know I want to give a talk on engineering management. And I'll just ask it to come up with 20 different titles and I'll give them the rough summary of what my talk idea is. I would have probably landed there eventually after a long time of iterating through titles. But I can look at it, or I can look at the outline it generates, or I can look at whatever and say, yeah, that's what I would have gone with. That's probably what I would have come up with. I know that. I think you get into danger zones when people are generating stuff where they don't know what it's supposed to look like, and then they're using that out there in the wild.
So I think that's all for the questions I have. You said you have a podcast.
Mhm.
What platform is it on and what's the title? If people are
The podcast is a podcast from SmartLogic, a mobile web and consultancy. It is called Elixir Wizards, and it focuses on talking to Elixirists from all over the world. We've talked to a lot of people over the world, and I'm a co-host along with some other fine folks at SmartLogic. We've talked, I think we're in season 12 now, maybe 13. I'm losing track of the numbers. We've been going for a while. Focus on talking to folks in the Elixir community about their different projects, different adoption strategies, like how did you adopt Elixir, or how did Elixir save you a lot of money, or what are some pet projects? What's a library you've been open sourcing? We've talked to, I think, almost 100 or so people about that in the last few years. So it's been really cool.
and I'm going to ask this question just because I read Elixir. So why don't you give me a brief rundown of Elixir and how is it different from some of the other languages?
Yeah, Elixir just celebrated, I think, 11 years of existence, 11, a young language. It is a functional programming language that was built on top of Erlang. So Erlang is 20, 30 years old, but was originally built around phone connections and just like keeping all these telecommunications networks up and running. Elixir vaguely has Ruby-ish syntax when you take a look at it. People tend to like it because it reads like English. It has a lot of fault tolerance, doesn't crash, or if it crashes, it handles itself really well, has pretty great error handling, really great interactive sessions when you're trying to run your servers and understand what's going on with your modules. The secret sauce for why people love it so much, I don't think we've ever really gotten there. People really like the community is usually what you come up with, but the language is easy to read. It helps, at least for me, my brain just quieted down. JavaScript was my main thing before, and I felt like my brain was cluttered all the time. There were so many resources. It was just like, oh, I want to do this one modal where you open a modal and you click a calendar and you can do a time range on it. There were like 80 different ways to do that, and none of them felt good. None of them, they all felt like I was pigeonholing it. And not to say that there's one good way to do that in Elixir, but when I was implementing those kinds of features, it just made more sense. I had a little bit better direction. The documentation is great. Hex docs, love that place. That's my favorite place to be.
So thank you for coming on the podcast and answering our questions.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
That's all for today on the Engineering Success Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us. Stay tuned for more.